Hey, everybody. If you want the full uncensored episode, be sure to click the link below to join the Fight Club on Patreon. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.
So I fight Twister. He hits me in the nose, breaks my nose, and breaks it pretty good. Like it was over here, and it was one of those fights. And
it still is, by the way.
It's still going that way a little bit, yes.
That'll be a suspension. That'll be a fine. Nyland going ballistic. He's a freaking madman.
I'm Chris Nyland, and this is the Raw Knuckles Podcast. All right, Kimby, awesome. Thanks for joining Tim and I. Appreciate it, pal.
You betcha.
Yeah, God, listen. We've had more guys on here from Saskatchewan, and there's something about Saskatchewan and tough guys. But there's also something about Saskatchewan with the names of the towns. Now, you're from Lucky Lake. Chase is from Porcupine Plain. Ron Greshner's from Good Soil. Yeah. They have the best goddamn names of towns I ever heard. But Lucky Lake.
I think Jimmy McKenzie and Bernie Federico, they got like Foam Lake and Quill Lake and all this stuff going on, yeah.
Yeah, they got the best names in Saskatchewan of towns. But your town, geez, such a little town, right? I think I looked up Lucky Lake, and I think the height of their population at one point, I think it was back in 1980, was like 333 people. And today it's down to 298 or something. Yeah. But just small. What's that like growing up in a small town like that? God.
You know what? It was. So I was probably there. We were close to 400 when I was growing up. My class had 12 kids in it. So we were called the Dirty Dozen growing up because we had the 12 kids. But it was, you could walk to the rink, which was a bonus because I would go there every day. But it was just, you knew everybody, so in the summertime it gets busy because everybody's farmers, right? The wintertime, everybody helps out at the rink to make sure the rink operates correctly. Guys are doing, we didn't even have a Zamboni at the time, Knuckles. We had, they had scrapers out there that would run around, and I'm pretty sure you might have known that growing up when you had to scrape the ice, people would all join in and throw the snow over the boards, and then you would get a big a tank out there with a mat on it, and you'd have to pull that around at the end of the night, and we'd flood it once a day. That's you got flooded at night, and then you had to survive the whole night. You would scrape it, and for games, senior games or whatever they did, so they didn't get to flood it all the time. But it was it was pretty interesting just to watch how an old you come from a town of 400 people, and I know you mentioned the places like where Chaser and these guys are at, Mackenzie and Saskatchewan boys, but they're small towns, and I think probably part of it was you got to skate every day, man. You were on the ice all the time. You didn't have to worry about ice. You had a place to go. So, and I lived at the rink, and that's how probably helped me out the most.
So, is there any other NHL guys out of Lucky Lake, Saskatchewan?
No, you know what? There's not, but I'm gonna. You can check me on this, but I'm gonna say that I know Dave Schultz. Back in the day, Dave Schultz might have ran through here at one point in time before he went to Swift Current and. In the probably the SJHL back in that day was because my brother played there too. But Dave Schultz might have had he might have grazed. He never lived there, but he might have just come through that way.
So Lucky Lake, and growing up minor hockey there, right? Like, how far did you have to travel as a kid to play games, right? Meaningful games. Did you have enough kids in the town to have a team from the town and then go around and play other teams, or what was that like?
So when I grew up, you would have your birth years were, instead of now they're like an 04, they're 05s. They play in their own area, but we'd have two birth years. So we'd have to have two age groups to sort of make a team up, right? So we would have you would be a minor and then a major, and so you'd play together. And as far as travel wise, you're looking probably. You wouldn't get outside of 75 miles probably to stay in your own league. And then if you ever went to provincials, there's a lot of stuff if your team was good enough, you could run at provincials. And that was the big thing. If you could ever get to provincials and win that was the Stanley Cup of our thing, So it was our senior team. When my two brothers played on it, they got to provincials one time and won it. And so that was pretty huge for our area. But When you're younger, we wouldn't. It was pretty hard for us to do it because we'd have to combine. I remember one time I had to combine with there was a guy named Burns McDonald was his name, and he was actually my first taste of a guy that knew anything about junior hockey. He coached the Saskatoon Blades in the Western Hockey League. He was part of that for a period of time, and I joined up with his community, and I think we got to the finals of the Southern Division, and we lost. But that's as far as I ever got to in that part of it.
So, hockey night in Canada, probably a big thing. Obviously, every Canadian kid, Saturday night, hockey night in Canada. There were two teams back in the day, the Habs and the Leafs. That was it. What was the Kimble family? Was there division in the ranks there when it comes to who you were pulling for, or was everybody a Leaf fan or everybody a Habs fan?
No, you know what? So growing up, it's probably the only time I could get the television away from the old man because he was watching the news and all that kind of stuff. But you see, back in when I was younger, and I'm not trying to say that I'm I walked uphill both ways. I'm not doing that nonsense. But I still grew up in the era where you got hockey night in Canada. And probably when I was watching it the most, Knuckles, when I was a younger kid, it was mostly the Montreal Canadiens because Scotty Bowman was there and they were Guy Lafleur, they were winning all their championships, right? And, you'd get the Leafs on there once in a time because I remember watching the Leafs when Darryl Sittler, I think he might have got 10 points in the one game when he played on Hockey Night in Canada. But so that was our biggest thing. And probably I didn't follow, we'd watch Hockey Night in Canada. Like the Flower was my hero growing up. That was the guy. And just the way he skated down the ice and just Guy Lafleur, he was a man.
Smoking butts between periods.
Yeah, and because I played with the Flower later on. I'll get to that later, but I played with him later on, which was probably my most awesome time in hockey when I got to go in the room with Guy Lafleur. But anyway, so you get to watch him. And so Hockey Night in Canada was huge, but and then it was good because Howie Meeker was on there, and a lot of people could either take Howie or they couldn't, but I liked Howie Meeker. He sort of taught you the game a little bit. And then I think between the one intermission, Peter Puck would come on, and Peter Puck was a big thing too. He would go through this.
Yeah, I remember Peter Puck.
Yeah, so he would come through there, and but that's where Howie Meeker was on the thing. He was the telestrator guy, but probably before John Madden was a telestrator guy, to be honest with you. So he would do all the stuff on the board. Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
When did it come reality to you when you were gonna I could play in the NHL? Was that always from day one when you were a kid?
No, that was just it was like when you go skating, you wanted to be Guy Lafleur on the shinny ice and that. So there was. I tell you what, I don't get to watch even when Knuckles, and I'm not dating Knuckles here and that, but when he was there playing and that, we didn't get them on TV or anything like that. Just that we didn't have it. And even when I first cracked the NHL when I was 20 years old, because I was in the fighting game, so I'd like to know some of the guys you wouldn't even know who the hell you were fighting, when you go into it, but. You would try to pull up old VCR tapes. We didn't get this stuff where you could watch these guys. You were going by word of mouth, and you were going into a fight. You didn't know if the guy was a lefty or righty. You were hoping you're going to get some information somewhere down the road. But, so I think when I went through junior hockey and I played in the Western Hockey League for 3 years, and I guess my last year I had a pretty good year. I went 35, 36, and 300 and some minutes, and I got drafted. But I guess that was sort of my first – thinking maybe I got a shot to get to the next. Because I was a bad skater. I was a terrible skater, and but I had good hands. I knew the game. I could fight a bit. So that's obviously what got me there. But it was just back then it was a different game. I wish I would have. It was kind of funny that you say that because about 4 days ago I was talking to Twister. He called me. I'm going to get him to do my kid's windshield. He's got a crack in it, and Twister runs a windshield company, and. I said to Twister when I was talking to him, I go, you know what, Twister? I said, me and you probably would have been a hell of a lot better off growing up or playing in the NHL about 10 years earlier. Because I said we probably got to play a little bit more. It was just the game was just a different game. They played everybody. They didn't have that fourth line sitting on the bench all the time. Everybody would have a chance to play. So,
Yeah, it's funny you say that because actually we're having Tony Twist on after you, probably about two,
Oh, are you?
about two, yeah, this afternoon. So we're gonna have a good chat with him too about the fighting and his career and all that. But how did the fighting come in? Now, listen, you go play junior the first time you go away. I mean, you were with Swift Current. That was in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. But your first year was in Calgary. What's that like? Leaving Lucky Lake, going away the first time, living with a billet family, and how old are you when you leave for the first time when you leave Lucky Lake?
So I have a late birthday. It's in November, so I sort of leave when let's put it at 15 years old. I go play midget hockey at AAA. There was a guy, Lauren Fry. He was a scout for the Colorado Avalanche. He's buddies with Joe Sakic. He knew Joe Sakic really well. So Lauren is probably the first guy that I play for that gives me a chance to play somewhere. And while I'm playing in Swift Current, I run into a guy who was coaching our Tier 2 team, the Swift Current Broncos at the time. They're Tier 1 right now in the Western Hockey League. They used to be in the Saskatchewan Junior when I was there. And Patty Janelle was the coach. And so Patty Janelle, he's a scout for the St. Louis Blues for a long time. And he's probably one of the most had the toughest teams that you'd ever play for. He loved the fighters. He loved them. And he used to coach the Flin Flon Bombers back in the day when Bobby Clark and the boys were running around there. And so anyway, Patty was there. And honest to God, Knuckles, this was the toughest. I was a 16-year-old kid. And this was the toughest team I ever played on. And there was guys that ended up going into bike gangs, and they were just tough hombres. And I wasn't even. I'm a 16-year-old kid playing for these guys, and I got nothing. You know, I'm not even in the fighting game yet. And there come a point in time when we're having practice, and we wouldn't even Patty wouldn't even show up for practices sometimes. He's either suspended or something. We'd go outside and we'd scrimmage, and then we'd get into not fights, but we'd do that fake fighting crap going on, and guys were wrestling.
Yeah.
And because I can always remember, we had a guy on our team, Sonny Jorgensen was his name, and this guy was off the wall, Sonny Jorgie was, but he grabbed me for some damn reason. He was a 20-year-old kid and grabbed me in this thing, and he put the fear of God in me for a second there. He told me to I had to figure out how to fight here pretty quick because his shit was pretty scary, man.
So was that the first fight you had in like organized hockey, or when did that happen, and who were you with? Was it in Calgary? I'm in Swift Current playing Tier 2 hockey, so under Patty Janelle. So we had all these tough guys. So I wasn't really fighting the heavyweights. I didn't have to. We had other guys that were doing that stuff, and I think I scored 25 that year. But I think that's when I first started getting into a couple fights. And there was a game, actually, I fought this Finnish kid, Knuckles, and it was kind of crazy. He was 6'3", and if you ever fight and I'll tell anybody this, if you ever fight a Russian or a European kid, I'm doing it because it's my job. You know, I'm sort of, I never fought. I never got angry when I fought. I had a job to do, right? Yeah. But these guys if you ever fight a guy that's scared, and those sons of bitches are tough because they're fighting for their last damn dollar, you know. And I'm sitting there, and we went toe to toe, and it was the crowd was going crazy, and eventually this sucker, he went down, thank God, because I was at home, but he goes down, and the crowd just went nuts, and that was my first time I fought, and I just thought, and I looked around and I said, son of a bitch, this is pretty cool. And you went to school the next day, and everyone was talking about what kind of job you did. And later on I'm laughing at it because later on I'm going, well, I fought a Finn guy. He probably never fought in his life. So but this son of a bitch was fighting for his life. It was kind of funny.
So we ask this question all the time. Did you have fear when you fought? Like, what about like nights before games? Would you keep you up at night, or were you? Oh yeah,
that you know what? And this is my bad part. This is the part that my downfall of my hockey. But I used to fight a lot off the ice. We get into. I hung out with the crew in Prince Albert, and they're my best friends that I used to. To this day they're my best friends, but. We sort of ran around, and I know you had Reed Simpson on, and he sort of ran with us a little bit. but we got in some fighting, and we'd get fighting down there. And I fought a lot in the summer, and I shouldn't have done that, but I was doing it because I was actually having fun doing it. It was just, we were winning a lot, and I liked it a lot. But when you get into when I got pro, it's a different ball game because you have 16,000, 17. I know everyone says, well, at least you showed up. At least piss on that. I wasn't into that game. I wanted to have a good fight, and I would always, when I got pro hockey, people didn't know about me at the start, and I throw quick hands. My right hand, I throw it pretty quick, and once people find out how you can fight, they start tying you up and that, and I didn't like that shit. And I wasn't strong enough to play that game. You could get into like when I watch Knuckles fight and I watch these guys fight, they're always stronger than I was, so I would always get my right hand tied up. So I had to learn how to throw my left hand and stuff like that. But I was always a guy that, hey, let's see who the tough guy is here, and stand back and fight. And that's just the way I wanted to fight. Obviously, I had to change it, but that's it's just that's how you had to go. And and I did change it. And but was I scared before? I wasn't scared, but I hated to lose. And I think when I hated, it was almost like I felt shame if you lost, and that's just the way. I'm just being honest with you. It wasn't scared because when you're fighting in the National Hockey League, you're fighting the best in the world at that game, and you're gonna lose. It's just when you do lose, do you come back? That's the question mark. And because I ran across a lot of guys, man, that they were tough and they get their ass handed to them, and that was it. They were done. They couldn't come back because I guess they just didn't. The confidence is huge in fighting, but I guess they just can never get it back again.
Calling all hockey lovers. Upgrade your podcast experience by becoming an enforcer. Gain access to the greatest hockey doc ever, The Last Gladiators. And don't settle for ordinary. Join the Fight Club over on Patreon today. Both of us. Halifax. I played in Halifax in my first year. First half a season. I went to Camp Montreal, went to Halifax. And I was at that crossroads you were at. It was going one way or the other. And what happened with me, so funny. The coach at the time, Bert Templeton, Bert loved tough guys. He always had tough teams. And I was a college kid, so he, at first he didn't like me. He didn't like any college kid. But once I started fighting, Bert liked me. And I got suspended for a game, and I asked him, I was going to be the godfather for my niece. And my sister asked me to be the godfather. And we were in Springfield, Mass, playing. I was suspended for 2 games. We were flying out of Boston on Sunday. We were playing Saturday night. I'm not playing. I asked the coach, can I go home and be the godfather for my niece? And he said, no, you got to stay here with the team, blah, blah, blah. I'm there. Come on, Boston, it's an hour and a half away. We're flying out tomorrow. No, you got to be here. Anyway, I said, fuck it. I jumped on the bus. I went to Boston. I'm the godfather. Next day, I show up at the airport in Boston, and he looks at me, and he goes, you really fucked up this time. And I'm there, oh, fuck. He said, you're going to end up in Flint. And I'm like, oh, fuck. I'm on the plane all the way back. I'm pissed. I'm nervous. I'm like, I'm going. And we get back to Halifax. Next day, I never got a call. I come in to practice, and he brought me in the office. He said, you're so fucking lucky. He said, I called Montreal and told them I was going to send you to Flint. And they told me, don't send him to Flint. He's not going to Flint, and you better play him. So I ended up playing. I played another week there. I think I played 3 more games, and I got called up, and I never went back. So I was at that crossroads. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's scary when you're on that contract, and you think, fuck, if I go to Flint, I'm done. I'm thinking I'm going the other way. And it's crazy how things work out, right?
Yeah, you're sitting this is back in the day when we're playing knuckles. I think if I was playing in the NHL, I was going to make 90,000. I think I was making 25,000 down in Halifax, and
Right.
obviously times were different. But you're not making a lot of money, and people always confused because every time they come to me, it's always fighting shit, right? And I get it, I understand. If it wasn't for fighting, I'm not getting to where I got to, but. I didn't start the game of hockey because of fighting. I started because I loved the game of hockey. I started because I watched Guy Lafleur on TV. That's what I started hockey for. And I wanted to be Guy Lafleur. Obviously, that's a hard guy to follow because he was one of the best.
I wanted to be Bobby Orr, right? That ain't happening.
But yeah, so it's people don't understand. I love the game of hockey. I love playing hockey, but that's the way it went. So that's okay.
Well, then that makes me ask the question: did you like to like that center ice, big stage fight? Would you prefer that over scoring a goal, or would you prefer scoring a goal?
I'll be well. You know what? My first game in Quebec. And I'll go to your question here, but I'm going to tell this. So I get called up, and we play New Jersey, and New Jersey wasn't a good team at that point in time. But they had Dave Maley and Perry Anderson was on their team also. Perry Anderson was my first fight actually, and I end up getting in 2 fights, and I score on a breakaway on Sean Burke, and that's my first NHL game, and I'm going, fuck, this is pretty easy, isn't it?
Right?
So, but life was pretty good then. But no, it's you know what? I always found, and this is the honest God truth. We went through a period when I played. There was a lot of tough guy wanted to fight tough guy, so we were going to go to center ice, and there was a lot of that going on. And I guess that's what the NHL went away from, even though every fan in the goddamn building was standing up cheering for it, But I always found, in all honesty, when I was playing the game, and if a fight started because of a hit or something, I just felt I was better at it because I was in the moment. I wasn't having to think about what I was going to do. The fight just started, and away you went, and then that was it. But when you're squaring off in front of at center ice, you're dropping the gloves and going there. You got 18,000 people looking at you, wondering what the hell's going on here, and that's when you're thinking about how he's setting up, and then you're trying how are you going to get to him and how are you doing this. So there's a lot of thinking that's got to go on when you're going to center ice as opposed to just starting off right off the get go.
Yeah, there's a big difference, you know.
Yeah,
it's better when it's just spontaneous. It happens during the play, but sometimes when you're squaring up, there's a big difference, you know.
And and when you're sitting there, you're squaring off at center ice with we talked about with Twister, and this crazy bugger's got his hands up like he's ready to box, and and you want to talk about long arms? Like I played Twister when he was in junior. We were rivalries in junior, so I think in Twister will confirm this, but I probably fight him the most of anybody that ever fought the man. But he was fighting him in junior as opposed to fighting him in the pro that was a big gap there, but he was still. He broke my nose our very first fight when we fight. And the thing that pisses me off about it is I wish it was on tape because it was probably our best fight ever. And the fight is going toe to toe, and I get him to get his head down, and I believe I'm starting to win the fight. I'm getting to the better of it, and he come over top of that right hand and just boom. But I didn't go down.
That bomb.
I didn't. This is a funny story, Knuckles. I'll be honest. So,
where were you? Where were you in Quebec, and he was in St. Louis?
I was in Prince. This is when I'm in Prince Albert Raiders in the Western Hockey League, and he was the Saskatoon Blades. Yep. So it's our very first fight, and we had visors on, and that we used to take our helmets off all the time when we fight. And so this fight
very honorable thing to do, right? Honorable.
And this is the first, probably my old man, he never skated in his life. This is one of the games he come to. And I don't think he come to a couple pro games, but he never come to another junior game. But because when he saw me get my nose broken, but it was kind of funny because I fight Twister. He hits me in the nose, breaks my nose, and breaks it pretty good. Like it was over here, and it was one of those fights. And
it still is, by the way.
It's still going that way a little bit, yes. But he so the fight goes on. I don't go down though, and I just grab him, and then they break it up, and I go to the dressing room, and one of my good friends, Wade Butches, he was playing on the team with me at the time, and we're sitting in the locker room, and everyone's looking around, and they don't want to look at me really, and I wonder what the fuck's going on here. What's going on? And I look over at Butchie.
I don't like the sight of blood.
I look over at Butchie and I go, what's wrong? I said, is my nose broken here? What's, it's not broken, but is it looking bad? Or he goes, and he's a smart ass, and he goes, he starts laughing. He goes, no, it's all right. Well, the son of a bitchin' thing was way over under my eye, and I'm going, you bastard. So they had to stick the prongs up there and straighten her back out. And, it was a mess. It was a mess.
It's funny you mentioned that with Twister. Now, you two ended up fighting again in the National Hockey League. And I got to bring this one up because I talked to our boy VZ, Jimmy, and he said, you got to talk about the night in Charlestown. I said, okay. So here's the deal, Tim. Kimby, all right, my buddy Jimmy, my best friend, Jimmy VZ, Charlestown, there was a bar called the Sweet Potato. They called it the Spud. And with a couple friends hang around there, Big Frankie. And Big Frankie became friends with Darren. And they're in the bar one night having a few beers. And it's when Kimby was with the Bees, apparently. And Twister comes to town. And they're at the Spud the night before the game. And they're drinking a few beers and shooting the shit with everybody. Tell me the story. Tell me the story. I just set it up for you.
So when I get to Boston, on my way to Boston, I get in a car accident, and I screw my hand up. I break like 4 bones in my hand, and I'm lucky to be alive, to be honest with you. And
where'd that happen?
On my way to training camp, just outside of Philadelphia. So I get in the accident. I wake up in the hospital. I drove the night before. I drove like 16 hours. Got up. I think about half hour into my journey, I run into the back of a semi. Did
you fall asleep?
I got to think I did. It was kind of foggy out. I don't know the story, and everyone thinks they go, were you drinking? I go, no, I wasn't drinking. I was driving to a goddamn camp, and I come off the semi come off an off ramp, and I was going down the road, and I had a little sports car, and I was probably doing about 80, I think, and he come off the ramp and got in front of me, and now it was early in the morning. It was a little foggy, but can I wave the falling asleep part? No, I can't. It could have happened. I don't know, Knuckles, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But anyway,
just curious.
And my hand goes through on the outside of the airbag and it breaks. But I wake up in the hospital. So anyway, I get to Boston. We go through all this. I go through treatment, and then they're going to play me again. And I end up going down to Providence. And that's where I run into to Vegas. I call him Vegas. It's Jimmy VC, but I call him Vegas all the time. And so I got to know him. I knew him a little bit before, just because Kelly Chase knew him, because Chaser played in the same team in Peoria as Vegas did. They played down there together. So I think Kelly sort of told Jimmy to sort of set me up. And anyway, when I get called back up to Boston, I was in a hotel, and Clark Donatelli was he was sort of up and down with Boston at the time, and they had sent him back down to Providence. Well, Clarky had the place in Charlestown, so then through Jimmy, so they didn't have to pay for both of them. I just took that place over, and Jimmy, he put all the furniture in there for me and a TV and all that shit. So that's how I got to make Vegas. So I'm sitting, like you said, we go to the Spud. So when I crash my car, I don't have no vehicle. Well, downtown Charlestown, to walk over to the rink, it took me maybe 10, 15 minutes to go to the old garden. I would walk over the bridge, and that's where I was at. So every day at practice, I would go over, I'd come back, and I wasn't a guy that cooked my own meals or shit like that. I'd go to the Spud and I would eat. And so we'd go to practice, I'd come back, I'd eat, and Big Frankie's there, and me and Big Frankie would sit there and have a couple beer, and then I'd head home I'd get supper and I'd head home and start the new day again. It was like Groundhog Day. Did it every day. That's how I did it in Charlestown. So the one night we're sitting there, I just got through supper, I guess, and Quebec was coming into town, and I'd been traded for Twister, so I was in St. Louis. Twister was, I'd been in Quebec. Twister was in St. Louis, and he'd been down in the minors. He could never get up for whatever reason. That's something you can ask Twister about, not me. But we get traded for each other. So this is the first time that I think we're playing against one another. And no, I'll take that back. I fought him again before St. Louis. But anyway, so Twister comes into town. We're playing Quebec, and he walks through the door at the Spud, and I'm going, and I got all the respect in the world for the man. We fought all the time. So and hockey players are sort of like that. We can sit there and talk to each other and then go out and fight. That was just the way we did it. And there was no ill will to the man or nothing. So we're sitting there. And the best part of this story is, though, and I don't find this out for many years later, but so I'm sitting down at the table and we're playing cards at the table, having a couple pop, and someone asked us, are you guys going to fight tomorrow? And I said, I'm pretty sure it's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And it did. And Twister, he was throwing these big bombs and he was running them off my helmet and that, and he probably hurt his hand. I think he did, actually. But the funny part of this whole story was, and I didn't find out, Vegas didn't tell me this till later on in life, but I was sitting at that table, and you guys know that show, The Town, right? The movie, The Town, that's made about the Charlestown story. Well, there was a couple guys that were involved in that story.
Some bad guys.
Sitting at that table. And I don't know this story, but I'm laughing. And eventually when that friggin' movie comes out, I call Vegas and I go, hey, that's a pretty good fucking movie, Vegas, The Town. It sort of tells a story about Charlestown and all that shit and those guys. And he said, Kim, you remember that night you and Twister were there? He said, yeah, they were playing fucking cards with you. I go watch yourself.
Well, it's funny. It's funny. Those guys you're talking about were shocked the next day when you two did fight. They couldn't believe it. Everybody's saying, here these fucking guys are playing cards. They're having a blast, talking to each other like everything's great. And then they go out the next night and they're fucking punching each other in the face. It's like
crazy shit.
Yeah.
That
crazy
was
shit is right.
That Charlestown. So we went out one night, and I'm not going to get too far into the weeds here on this story, but
it's okay.
There was a show called W5 or I forget, or 2020. I don't know. It was a news thing, an hour news thing at night.
Yeah.
And if you ever remember the thing, I think it's called the silent code that went through there. I think there was
the code of silence.
Or code of silence.
Code of silence.
So they was sitting there going through that, and I think one night I'm with Frankie again, and Vegas was with me when we went to the Legion or something in Charlestown. You had to be a member to get in there, so they got me in there, and all of us. There was like me, and there was a guy named Rebel was there, and
Rebel, Rebel Sheehan,
he was there, and some other guys, and we were sitting there. So this fucking show comes on, and they put it on, and we're watching this shit, and it's going about these guys, the hockey rink where the guy gets out in the stretcher. You got the skates. He's been shot, and I don't know none of this stuff, And I'm sitting there, and it was just to watch that story. And I'll end it. I'm not going to go in there far, but just to watch that on there, and later on you find out some stories about that. It's pretty.
Get into the action with Fight Club, Raw Knuckles' new exclusive Patreon. From ad-free episodes to uncensored content and discounts on merch. There's something for every hockey fan. Join the Fight Club today. You had that 1 year in Boston, okay? Providence, it was Chicago Blackhawks, Halifax, Quebec, St. Louis. When you look back at those years, what was your best year of hockey for you? Like playing hockey and fighting, but the most fun you had playing the game, not just the fighting part, but playing the game and getting an opportunity to actually do something other than just fight.
Yeah, I think when I first started out in Quebec, that was probably when I was with Bergie. He liked me, and so I was playing. Christ, they stuck me on the power play and everything there, Knuckles. So I was doing good there. When I played in Boston, though, was probably my best year. You get in later on. I run in well, but and then so Mike Milbury was our GM. Well, I wasn't. Harry was probably the big guy. I think Mike was the assistant. Maybe I don't know, but Mike was. I don't know what Mike was doing. Him and his. I ran into him and O'Connell. O'Connell was down in Providence, and it was almost like there was too much shit going on there. It was just. I had a good year with in Boston, and Milbury. He was sort of talking to my agent. I don't know why. Harry wasn't doing it, but Milbury was the one doing my contract, and he didn't want to bite on it, and I ended up signing with Florida. But I always wish I would have stayed with Boston. But Christ, the Milbury wouldn't come near the number, so I had to go. It come down to the money at some point in time, and I wish he would have kept me there because I liked it there. The garden was good for me because it wasn't very big, and I could, skating wise, I could get around where I needed to get to, but. I think
that was a perfect building.
Yeah, it was just I just love Boston. It was I was in a good spot where I was over in Charlestown. Everything was good for me there, and I felt comfortable. I had guys that the guys that I hung out with in Charlestown, like I said, Big Frankie was with me all the time, man. And it was just, I just had good people around me, and Vegas was there.
God rest his soul, right?
Yeah,
Big Frankie.
Big Frankie, yeah. And so it was always, there's so I'll tell you another story about Big Frankie while we're there. Big Frankie's a huge man, and he put a beer in his hand and he couldn't even see the beer, and Big Frankie would pretty well polish off that beer in one gulp. It was just gone, And, I'm sitting there. My wife was flying in. She was my girlfriend at the time, but she flies into Boston, and her flight wasn't going to get into like around 5:00, and we were playing that night. So I couldn't get her at the airport, and I didn't want to get her into a cab and come over there because, she probably wasn't going to get there. So I said, "Hey, Big Frankie," he said, "you got to go get her for me." And Big Frankie, he's got this. He was going to get her. He had no problem going to get her. He hardly ever drove at all, but he had this big Oldsmobile, I believe, this old beat up Oldsmobile. He pulls up and grabs her, and my wife's, she's
who the hell is this?
Yeah, she's a very well dressed woman and very good looking woman and everything, and she's never seen shit like this coming at her. But Big Frankie's with her, and he picks her up in that, and she's the nicest person you'll ever meet in your life. Just kind to everybody. And she gets to the game, and she's sitting in the seats, and Big Frankie takes her to the game, and he's sitting in that seat, and he can barely get into one seat, Big Frankie. And I look up in the crowd, and Frankie's sort of living over there, and she's a tiny girl, and she's like crowding her out. But he went and got her. But it was one of the funniest stories I've ever seen. It was, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, and my wife can tell the story better, Knuckles, New Kids on the Block were at the game, and we end up losing the game. And I think they were down after, and my wife, she was a pretty attractive woman, and I think one of the guys had said something. Hey, they said they liked me the way I played and all this, and they had a limousine outside, and they were going to go party after, but I wasn't in a good fucking mood. So someone said something. I think it was Joey or someone said something, and I think I told him to fuck off at the point in time. But my wife goes, "Do you know who the fuck that was?" And I said, "I don't really give a shit. And I left back to where I was, So, but she never lets me forget that, because we could have been out maybe drinking at a bar with New Kids on the Block.
Oh, fuck, that's funny.
How was your time in Chicago? Did you live in the city then?
No, you know what? I lived out my first year out there. I lived outside, and then I lived with Eddie Belfour my second year. I was there 3 years. The last year was I was only there it was the lockout season. But I probably met some of the best guys in hockey that I ever grew up with. Like Guy Lafleur, when I got to play with him in Quebec, was probably, God, the guy would do anything for you. He would help you out. He was more than,
he was awesome.
He was more than you watch him on TV and the player he was, but he was even better than that off the ice. He was just an awesome person. And I ran into, when I get to Chicago, Chris Chelios Chelly was there, and probably Chelly's probably pretty well a spitting image of Guy Lafleur. I just refer to Chelly that way, because Chelly he'd give you the shirt off his back to help you out. Chelly would, and he was. I just talked to him on the phone the other day. Actually, he was up in St. Louis playing at a game, and I ran into him. But he probably one of them. Just the way that Chelly played the game. He could go out and he could drink all night, and he'd show up the next day, and he was a superstar, and he played 45 minutes a game, hardest working guy on the ice all the time. He was just that's the mentality he had. And I don't know if he would have, the Montreal Canadian days, maybe that's where Chelly would have learned that shit at, or I don't know, but to be a champion, to be a leader like he was. But he was, Eddie Belfour, Roenick, these guys were pretty good guys, man. They took care of me, and I got nothing bad to say about that. They're the good people. I just didn't like Chicago, because I got to Chicago, and when I was in St. Louis and Boston, Brian Sutter was my coach, and you know what? And I'll go back to what I told you guys earlier in the conversation. I didn't get much TV, so I never got to watch Brian Sutter play, but to hear how the people talked about him, how he played, he was a tough guy. He played and he scored goals, and he sort of did it all. He fought everybody that he was supposed to fight, and I'm not saying he was a regular tough guy, but he stuck up for his teammates, because he was playing with Bernie Fedorko at the time, and he did well for himself. And I had nothing but respect for Brian, and Sudsy he liked me, and so he brought me to Boston, and then I run into his brother Daryl in Chicago, and just didn't get along with the guy. Him and Paul Baxter were there, and I just
fucking Baxy.
Yeah, for whatever reason. I guess they didn't like me they traded for me, but then whatever, how you fall out of grace with people, and And then pretty soon your confidence goes and you got nothing, and shit just went downhill. And that was the end of it.
Yeah, geez, you know, when I think of that, Daryl Sutter, that surprises me. And again, you need a coach who's going to, try and help you become a better player and a full-time player. I was so fortunate being here. I had like Claude Rel to start. He was unbelievable with me. And then Lemaire, fuck. We had Jock on, Tim and I, and like he was just unbelievable. Like he said, I know you can fight. I don't want you to fight as much as you fight. I want you to be a hockey player, which fucking imagine a coach saying that to you, being a tough guy, how that would feel.
Exactly.
And then he follows through. Yeah. He works with you day in and day out on the ice. Then he puts you on the fucking ice in different situations that you were never in before. And then all of a sudden you get all this. So that confidence, that's a real fucking thing when people say it. People, I lost my confidence. Yeah. Well, I can tell you from my own experience, I had that. And I'm sure you know that too. You got a coach that's, like you said, you like Bergie. Bergie loved tough guys, but he wanted them to play too, which was awesome. And he gave you opportunities. And some guys just don't get that.
See, when I went through it, Knuckles, I run into, when I'm in St. Louis, like Holly and Oatsy were there, and that's where year Holly scores 86 and, just has a phenomenal year. And Holly, just very smart player. I like being around. I like listening to him. You get on people's ass and do that. But Brian Sutter, when he was there, and even when he was in Boston to a certain point, he ran. In Boston, he played me a little bit more. He used 4 lines more, but in St. Louis, because Holly was, they had to play these guys all the time. And we went through that era, and Roenick and Larmer and all these, they're all playing all the time now. So it went down to 3 lines. And when you bring up Jacques Lemaire, though, back in that day, that New Jersey was winning Stanley Cups, but they were playing 4 lines. They had Randy McKay and Peluso, and that was their 4th line going through, and that 4th line was dominant for him. And I get it. I was a bad skater. I wasn't a good skater, but I went through a point in time where that 4th line, like Chicago, had Stu Grimson, and Peluso didn't play that much in Chicago. He was fighting. When he went to New Jersey, he started to play more, but that was just Mike Keenan, Daryl Sutter, and Brian Sutter sort of followed in with Mike Keenan because that's, they went to Team Canada together at some point in time. And they
But Kimby, you say you're a bad skater, but listen, you could get up and down the ice. And I'm sorry, but like, there's no reason why you couldn't have played more back in that era. And I say that, come on, today you look at the game, they're quicker, they're faster, all that shit. The game didn't make that jump until later. I'm just,
But that's what
opportunity. You need the right guy in your fucking corner too.
Yeah, I was lucky you're lucky if you get to play 2 shifts a game, and that's what it become. And when you have Twister on, he's going to tell you the same story. And I told Twister, I said, Twister, the only difference of me and you had, I kept trying to play the game because I wanted to play the game. So in the summertime, I wasn't trying to get bigger. I was trying to get my stuff faster, and I wasn't trying to. And Twister, he figured it out, and he was getting bigger, and he took his job when he became the toughest guy in the league at one point. And
oh fuck,
no
question.
He was messing guys up, but it was he got it, and he said, shit, if I'm going to stay here, this is what I'm going to do. And Twister figured it out where I was trying to do something else. And but that's and I don't know. I wanted to play because I love the game, and that's what I wanted to play. But we were only playing like 1-2 shifts a game, and it was just fuck, that gets old after a while, man.
So where's your wife from, Kimby? Is she from
it's a town called Granite City, Illinois? But I was telling Tim earlier, I can get downtown St. Louis in about 15 minutes. I'm right there on that border of Illinois and Missouri.
So your wife is from there. You met her when you were in Chicago.
Yeah, she was a Rams cheerleader, and she was when the Rams had the Kurt Warner and them were here when they went and won the Super Bowl. So she cheered in that, and she was able to go over to Hawaii and go to the Pro Bowl over there, and she caught herself a big fish and all this shit. So she got a ring before. I never got a ring. She got a ring. So that's how that worked out.
How'd you meet her though? Just out one night, or
you know what I did? We were out. I was actually out with Chaser, and Pat Jablonski was our goalie, and we just went to a place, and I ran into her, and later on down I run into her again.
Was that in St. Louis?
Yeah.
Was that when? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that's where I met her at, and then we traveled around, and we did the long distance stuff that we were doing. And then when hockey was done, I guess then we eventually got married at a later age, but that's, yeah.
Okay. So how many kids you have now?
We have a daughter. She's 21, 10/10/01 her birthday. She'll be 22. She'll be 23 this year. And then I got a boy who's going to be playing in El Paso in the NAL league, the NAHL league. So
Yeah.
he's been trying to get.
How old is he?
He'll be 20 this year. He's been trying to get in this darn league for the last couple of years, and he ended up playing in the NCDC last year. But I'll tell you, this is funny, Knuckles, because he went to camp this year, and he's sort of getting into this fighting game a little bit, right? And I know the game's changed a lot. But I told him, I said, hey, you go here. I says, you got to start fighting here. Get your name known. I said, if you get your name known, if you can make the team by fighting, we'll worry about ice time later on because your coach will, then you'll work yourself into that. But you have an ability to fight. So he went up to Detroit where they had their tryout, and he just got back from their other tryout. So he was on the ice for like 6 games. I think he had 5 fights. His general manager told him, he said one of the fights that he had was they went to center ice. He fought their tough guy, and he went to center ice, and it went on for about a minute or so, and they were just trading bombs, I guess. And he's like 5'11", but he likes to stand, but he's got long arms on him. And the general manager said that's probably one of the best junior fights I've ever seen. The only other one that can compete with that is when Cam Jansen's fought up in the Ontario League when he's playing there. So, and you know how Cam fought. Cam fights like long ones. So, but my kid, I tried to tell him though. I said, when you go to these fights, I said I used to fight like wide open and get hit in the head all the time. And I said I need you to fight more like chaser fights. You get in tight and you tie these guys up. And he hasn't got to that point yet. He's still standing back for a while. So we'll see how that goes.
And then do a lot of guys go to college out of there, or is that the goal?
You try to get up to that. A lot of guys will find Division I, and a lot of guys will Division III. But there's a lot of good teams in Division III nowadays, and it's sort of. I've always looked upon. I don't know where he's going. I never put a limit on anybody. Everyone's dreams are their own. So you make what you can. Every year is different. But college is. I hopefully he can get to college after this year. This is last year of junior eligibility, so hopefully he can get into some college and see what happens there.
Chase's son, Will, right? Doesn't it? One of them?
Luke Will is Will's his oldest, but Luke's the one that's just playing now, yeah. He's
duking it too, right? He's a pretty good fighter too.
Yeah, he was up in the Saskatchewan Junior League, and I saw some of Chaser's videos. And but I think one of his middle kid's going to Arizona out there, and I think Luke's going out there now, so I think he's into the college thing. Is where I believe that. Don't quote me on that, but I think they're both playing on the same team.
Are you ready to take your love for hockey to the next level? Join the Fight Club Raw Knuckles exclusive Patreon to unlock amazing perks like ad-free episodes, bonus interviews, and even a chance to win a game day experience with me in the Habs Cave. Don't miss out on this ultimate hockey experience.
So I ran into a little bit of health problems here.
I was going to ask you about that again. Did you have a bout with cancer, did you?
Yeah, so I ran into, about 5 years ago, I ran into this thing called CLL. It's a form of leukemia that you run into. And I hadn't told anybody about it. I kept it to myself. And my family knew about it, obviously, and a couple of my friends. And the hockey community, I didn't let no one know. I didn't want to talk about it with anyone. I went through it myself. There was a process you went through where you went on a watch and wait process, and then once it eventually gets to a point where it gets bad, my doctor, who's a lady doctor who is just fantastic, I went through a form of it's called immunotherapy. So it's not chemo. It's a form of chemotherapy, but it's a lighter version where it doesn't get into hair loss and all that stuff, right? But so I went through that, and I come out. I'm in remission right now, but. I went through it with Kelly Chase, who's been on there with you. Chaser ran through it, and he had a similar version of mine, a faster acting one, actually. So when I found that out, I made contact with Chaser, and I was talking to Chaser right when he first found out he had it. And, I started talking to him, and I asked him what he had and everything. And I said, Chaser, I'll just be honest with you. I said, I've dealt with it for 5 years now, and this is what I had. It's not at your level, but it's the one below your level. And so I just reached out to Chaser. So he tells a story that he reached out, and that's not how Chaser is.
Yeah.
But I reached out to Chaser just so I said, hey, you call me anytime you want, bud. And I said, I'll tell you what I went through. And because there was, I'll tell you what, when you first find out you got it, Knuckles, I don't know. I didn't know anything about it. You hear all the stories in the world, but you don't know about it. And when the doctor told me about it, I was actually driving friggin' home, and I look over at my wife, and she's got like tears coming down her eyes, and I'm going, hey, what the fuck's wrong? What the fuck's wrong with you? I didn't know the severity of it. I really didn't. I'm not, whether I'm stupid or what I am, I don't know that. And then I probably come home for the next probably 2 weeks, and I don't think I could cry anymore, Knuckles. I didn't know, and it wasn't because of me. I'm fine with my life. I've gone there, but I had 2 kids that I was worried about, right? So, and you think about your kids, and so for about 2 weeks straight, man, I just sat there and I couldn't get this shit out of my head. And you go on the internet, and that was the first thing I told Chaser. I said, stay the fuck off the internet, Chaser, because there's nothing but bad shit coming out of there. I said, trust your doctor and what you're going to do. And I finally got to that point, and I went to my doctor, and this is the honest to God truth, Knuckles. I said to my doctor, I said, hey, I don't know much about this. I said, obviously, this is you've done this your whole life. I said, all I want you to do is you just tell me if this shit goes south on me. And if it's going south, give me a heads up so I get my ducks in a row here so I can go through the process, right? And she sat there and told me, and it was the best thing that I probably heard. She says, hey, I got lots of shit for you. Don't you worry. You ain't going anywhere for a while here. So, and then when I watched Kelly go through what he went through, I was worried for him. I really was, because he had his was faster moving stuff, and I was I was scared for him. And he fought through it like a trooper. He was coming in there. He was riding his bike and all that story. He was telling me about the Peloton, him and Twister. And I said to Chaser, I said, geez, I like your story, man. And you can ride your fucking bike all you want, but this shit's going to kick the shit out of you, and you're going to get weak. And he finally did, and it got to him. But he went in there, he got that mentality that I'm going to beat this thing. And he had to slow that game down, because it's something that, it knocks the shit out of you, man. It does.
Well, I'm sure it can be a humbling experience for sure. Yeah. And again, we're all one day going to have to deal with our mortality. Yeah. And we don't know how we're going to deal with it until we're faced with that, right?
Exactly
and
right.
Getting that touch. But believe me, I don't sit and think about it all the time. I looked at what happened with my dad. I mean, he died at 88, but it's like, he was struggling with some things that he kept inside too, and that's not good either.
No.
Like, even though, that's the way you dealt with it at the start, like, it's not good to hold all that shit in. It's always good to speak to other people about stuff. And, it helps. It helps to have someone to talk to, regardless of the situation.
That's what Chaser did. And so Chaser got going, and Kelly lives totally different than Darin Kimble does. Darin Kimble stays over here. He's good where he's at. I don't need to be in all this. Kelly's, he's doing stuff with the NHLPA, and he's hobnobbing with a lot of people that I've never, he's got Garth Brooks coming to his thing and all this stuff. But he brought some people in that, like Chelly showed up, Eddie Belfour showed up, and then they all said the same thing. He said, man, why didn't you let us know? And, you don't think about it at the time, because you grew up and you had to fight for everything you had on your own. You know what I mean, Knuckles? And you know that as well as anybody.
Yeah,
and
I do.
You don't like to rely on people. The job that we did, we were sort of the caretakers of the business, and you weren't wanting people to help you out. You were going to do it all yourself, and you thought you were invincible for a while, right? And so, but I went through it, and I think when I went through it, and like I said, when I was on the phone with Chaser, and there was a couple times where tears were shed, and just on the one phone call, it was just two guys that used to fight for a living, and now this is coming into your life. And then when you get talking to people after it happened, and what Kelly did for he raised like $700,000 out of this puck for cancer thing that he did here. He had a bunch of guys come in, and I got to talk to guys like Chelly, and guys that. In my mind, that they mean well, and that they're not just saying, "Hey, are you okay?" Or they actually care.
They're sincere.
Yeah.
That sincerity. Yeah.
And I'm a person that, I don't believe in some people say that shit. I don't give a shit. I really don't. I gotta believe it in my heart that you actually do. And some of the guys that were there, like, and Twister knows about it now. And I just talked to Twister about it the other day. And, but Twister, he means well. And when people mean well and they actually get it, or they actually are there for the right reason. And you can tell when people are there for the right reason or not. You know that as well as anybody. And that means a whole lot more. You know what I mean?
Well, it's funny, you talk about Guy Lafleur, right? Your opportunity to play with him, and it's incredible. I hated Guy Lafleur growing up because I was a Bruins fan, right?
Yep.
I got to Montreal, man, he couldn't have been nicer to me, like you said. And then we played together in New York, and that's when he left New York and went to Quebec and played with the Nordiques. And I used to go, when I played here in Montreal with him, like, I had to get to the rink early. I could never stay around the house, right?
Correct.
So I would leave my house about 3 o'clock. No, 3:30. I'd get to the rink around 4, okay, for an 8 o'clock game.
Yep. Saturday
night, hockey night in Canada, 8 o'clock. And I would get to the locker room, and Guy had already been there for an hour. My friend, which I couldn't believe. No, he'd be there taping his sticks, having a coffee, smoking a butt, having a hot dog, eating potato chips.
Didn't he have his bottom half of his equipment on, his skates and that on? Because that's what he did in
No,
Quebec.
not yet.
Oh, okay.
No, he would do it earlier. He would do that closer to game time. But we used to just shoot the breeze. And here I was the year before. I'm in fucking college.
Yeah.
Fucking college bars, fucking playing college hockey. And the next year, here I am with Guy in the room, a guy I absolutely hated. And he ended up being the freaking nicest guy. And it was awesome for me, having played with him in Montreal, and he couldn't go anywhere. And even in retirement, it's still the same way. Guy was like God here.
Yeah.
And when he came to New York, it was so nice to be able to see him outside of Quebec. Now he's playing with another team here in New York that, some people didn't know who the fuck he was.
That's crazy.
Which was incredible, right? You go from everybody and his brother knows who you are to New York. Yeah, the odd person knows who you are, but the majority of them don't have a fucking clue who Guy Lafleur is.
No.
And it was awesome to see that, because there were times he could kind of relax and just he could leave his house and go to the store and get something, and people wouldn't recognize him.
Yeah, he had the when he's in Quebec, he had the Sugar Shack out there. So he took all of us young guys out there because we had a young team.
Right.
We went out to the Sugar Shack and then he was driving a Bentley. I think the Bentley was $250,000 back in the day. Like, it was just like he was he was like the Hollywood hero. But one of my best stories with the Flower, we were and it goes back to the ice, and it's a little stupid thing, but so usually when you're in my position, or you don't get as much ice time as the other guys, you would always have to stay extra and do some skating, or do whatever. Well, when we were in Quebec, before every practice, the Flower was the first guy on the ice all the time. Yeah. And he would take a bucket of pucks out there, and he would do that half moon around the one end, and he would just go through and shoot all those pucks. And so then I see this guy going out there, and again, childhood hero, sitting there doing that. And I said, well, fuck, get your ass on the ice, stupid. Let's go, see what this guy's doing. And so I get out there and I try to do that shit. He would just fly through it in that smooth shot that he's got and that goofy curve. And he was the one guy, Knuckles, and I ain't lying to you. We sat there and he goes, I can curve this puck this way. And I go, bullshit. I said, but he could curve the goddamn puck and everything when he was shooting. But he would sit there and he'd go through that whole line. And so one of my first times out there, he goes through the line and I'm watching him, and I'm watching my hero go up, and then he goes, hey, let's grab these pucks and put them in this thing again. He says, you can do this. And I'm all excited. I got Flower telling me to do this shit. And fuck, I get halfway through and I couldn't make it any farther. I was done.
Right.
But he was, he had those big forearms on him too. He reminded me of Brett Hall, and Bobby Hall had those big forearms. But
a lot of people didn't realize that, right? He had big fucking hands, Guy, and big forearms. Yeah. Unbelievable, like natural. Like
it was just phenomenal. Just to watch him do what he did. It was one story on him when he was playing. We're playing the Kings. I think we're playing the Kings. Marty McSorley was there, and fucking Marty went and hit him behind the net after the whistle went and hit him, and I went after Marty for that bullshit. I said, "You're not fucking doing that," That,
fucking right.
Yeah, but that not many guys would. He was such a hero, I'm not saying guys would give him back in the day. You could hook guys all the time and that, and guys could hook him because when the Flower could still get going up and down the ice, he could still skate because it was just a natural.
Yeah.
But not many guys would hit him. That just wasn't going on. And
yeah, I know. You fucking hitting Guy Lafleur. I mean, come on. I mean, they even got that way with Gretzky, except Calgary, Edmonton. Yeah, shit would happen, but for the majority of the league, guys wouldn't fucking go after.
Now, once you get into playoffs, it was a
different story.
Playoff hockey, the playoff hockey is the best sport that ever. Regularly, Guy Lafleur told me this.
Right.
Guy Lafleur told me this when we were young, and now we weren't making the playoffs in Quebec. But when you sit around and ask a guy questions all the time, and he basically said the first 20 games, Kimby, when we were in Montreal, the first 20 games we set ourselves up for the push. He said then you'd go through the next 40 games, and it was sort of let's just get through the process here, and then the last 20 games you come and you were trying to get yourself ready to go into the playoffs and then you were tuning it up again. And that's how he looked at it.
Yeah.
And he's playing in Montreal where I guess, you could probably, their team was so damn good, you could probably take the half the year or not go full throttle, but they were winning all the games anyway. You know what I mean?
Fuck. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Listen, the game has changed somewhat, but how do you look at the game today? What do you miss about the game when you look at the way it's played today? And listen, playoff hockey is the best. There's no question about it. It's the toughest trophy to win in sports, the Stanley Cup. Playoff hockey is unbelievable. But when you watch the game today, what is it that you like or you don't like?
I think it all goes back to what they did to the tough guys, Knuckles, when they sort of ran them. They sort of ran them out of the league, right? To a certain extent. And then now you got guys that are rough guys, but they're not tough, and they're Ryan Reeves is still around, and he's one of the tougher guys. But Ryan Reeves fights 5 times a year. That's what he's fighting. You know what I mean? So I like how he plays. He skates and hits everybody, and he's phenomenal at that part still. But so they've taken that away, and I think my biggest thing that I don't like about you get I think the referees get involved too much in the ball game anymore, and it's almost like the first round of playoffs. You're turning into if your power play is good enough, that could almost get you through the first round because they're calling so many fucking penalties. And regular season, they're calling shit all over the place now, and you're on the power play half the damn time. So if you got a good power play, I think it can carry you somewhere, But I just don't like all the penalties. I like back in the day, and you can watch it when they get to the finals. There wasn't many penalties called, and they let the guys decide it themselves. And but I hate when they call so many penalties because you just go on a power play. That's just boring shit. That is.
Yeah, it's funny. You look at, you said it like guys fight 5-10 times a year. That I don't know. I think the most fights last year might have been 10. One guy had 10, like 10.
Yeah.
Ooh, like it. Fuck. I know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
I like the kid that was playing for the Rangers, that Rempe kid that come up, he was going out and doing it, and you know how big he is, and he shows he can skate, and he gives a lot of excitement to the Rangers crowd. But he ran. I think
he got hit a few times.
Yeah, and
he got hit.
You asked Twister about that. Twister gets more into this shit than I do, but I think the kid from Columbia, or not Columbia, Columbus. I think he got the better of him, but Twister.
Oh, did he ever?
Twister just says that the way the guy fights, Twister says, and this is Twister. He says he's going to get himself hurt because he's so wide open, So, and I seen him when I was back in Saskatchewan. Though I was watching the news and it come on there, and they had George Larocque was sort of giving him some fighting lessons, I guess. So
give him like uppercuts.
Yeah. I was watching it with my buddy, and I go, George, I said, I like your technique in that, but that ain't how that shit works all the time.
He won't be throwing many uppercuts, that kid. He's fucking 6'9" or whatever the hell he is. Jesus.
But and taking a lesson from George is pretty good because George ran the league for a while. He was the toughest guy in the league for a while. So I guess if you're going to learn something, that's a guy to learn. But it's just I don't know if there's. I like the way the kid plays, and I like because he was trying to fight. And maybe that forces some other teams to do it, but you're still going to run into these old guys and Gary Bettman and all this stuff that are going to, they don't want it there. They don't want it. So I don't know if that's gonna. I don't know what's gonna happen. I like
We
it.
got that kid. We got that kid here in Montreal, Abba Jackai, and he is he is one tough kid too.
Yeah.
Boy, he got the hands on him. He got the height. He got the length. All that stuff. He really and a good kid. He's a throwback
He can play
player.
though too. He can play too though.
He can play.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can
play.
If you can get like, I got nothing wrong with that. If you can get a guy, but some of these guys, you're superstars. You're good hockey players. There's always going to be that group. Like Connor McDavid should not the skill this guy has and how he skates and that shit that nobody can. I've never seen anybody able to do it. Him and McKinnon out in Colorado. To watch these two guys play the game, how they skate, you've never seen that in hockey. I don't care. And
it's unbelievable.
You can't have Connor McDavid, someone roughing him up. That shit just can't go on. That guy's the future of your hockey for a long time, and so you need to have someone that's going to take care of that. I don't care if I was the general manager of that team. I would be saying I don't care if the fucking guy can skate, but he's going to sit there and no one's going to touch this guy.
Yeah,
I don't care.
I agree. Fuck, I look at the perfect example for me is Sidney Crosby.
Yeah.
Like he hasn't had a guy almost his whole career.
Yep.
And I always wonder why the fuck did Mario Lemieux let that happen like that? Because Mario always had somebody there watching out for him.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you take care of Sid? I know the game has changed somewhat that way.
Yeah.
But still, there's fuck. He ended up with a fucking bad concussion there early in his from that Cook guy, and fuck, had nobody there to answer the bell really. So
no, I totally agree.
Man.
Yeah,
that's a part of the game I wish would still be here too. A lot of guys.
You see, with Colorado, McKinnon, they had there. Joe's always had he gets it because he had guys around him. Joe did all the time, so he gets it. But he usually has someone there to take care of the business. He doesn't. I think when you get a superstar like these guys got, and especially Joe Sakic, who he was. Joe was one of the most probably. Yeah. If I use the word underrated, I think I'm pretty close to it because he became a superstar. When I think Team Canada gets the gold medal, and I think they, he scores a big goal or whatever. But Joe Sakic, when I watched him play in Quebec, I was there. We were sort of the same age. To watch him play in Quebec, boy, was he was something special. I didn't know I played junior against him, and I didn't think Sax was that good, but holy God, could he do some shit on the skates, man. Oh, boy.
And he's a humble kid, He's one of those humble superstars, which I think is awesome too.
Yeah, I agree.
Listen, Kimby, it's been awesome to have you. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I'm so happy for you and your family that you got through that bout of cancer. You did.
I appreciate it, man.
And I hope that it still continues and you stay healthy. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.